All right, good morning, church. We are live in the room and online. Welcome to Public Theology 201, Wisdom and Emotional Intelligence. We've been talking about EQ. How many of you have taken the test in this book? How many of you taken it? Yeah, good. Well, I hope that it helps you establish a baseline for what you're good at and what you could use some more work in. It definitely has some limitations. I was underwhelmed by the particular test in this book, which is shocking because I have an older version of this that I bought maybe 7 or 8 years ago that had a different test that I thought was better fitting. So I think this is an introduction. I also put a link in Church Center to a more robust test that you can take, but it's about $100, which is why we went with this version. But I do think it's $100 absolutely well spent if you can spare it. And if you want to take it and then come sit down with me, I would love to talk through your test with you. One of the other options is to become certified as an emotional intelligence coach. And I looked into that a little bit. I think I might do that. One of my long-term goals for our church is that we establish a leadership academy. And this is probably the first you're hearing of this. But if we were to do that, emotional intelligence is going to be a big part of that because it influences so many aspects of our life, our motivation, our self-regulation, our empathy, our social skills, and our social awareness. Today we're going to be working on this word, empathy. Empathy is going to be the main thrust of today. Just as a refresher, we started in freshman year knowing the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing facts in your head, but kind of ignoring or shaming your body and your soul because it can't handle the mysticism that comes with a soulful experience, and it can't handle the awkwardness of living in a flesh and body. So knowledge often has to do with just things in our mind and not in our body or in our soul, and because of that, it actually stops us from living well. There's a huge gap between knowing and doing. There's a huge implementation gap. And so like you reading 100 books does almost nothing. You reading one book and applying it to your life, and implementation, is a huge difference. And really, that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, knowing facts and living well. Then we moved on to sophomore year, wise fools and Jesus. Do you remember we talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect, where your peak confidence is when you actually know nothing, and then once you start to actually study, you fall down into the pit of despair and slowly work your way up. But even when you become an expert, you are less confident than when you are a moron, and that is just the way of the world. That is actually what it means to be a sophomore. A wise fool is what sophomoric means, if you remember your SAT words. And we talked about that last week and how Matthew 7 is an incredible wisdom teaching from Jesus. Do you remember this one that hit a little hard? If your peace depends on everything going right, you do not seek peace, you seek control. Most therapists would tell you that the number one thing they want to get across to you often is, you are not in control. You're wanting to control things is an illusion. It is not real. You do not get to decide your life. I like the image of you are not deciding your path in the world. You are on a raft on a river. And to say that you're in control is a lie because the river is in control. But you do have a paddle. And you can steer yourself away from rocks. You can steer yourself down the rapids of life. So to say that you have no power is inaccurate. But to think that you're in control is also inaccurate. Finding your way to flow with life, to flow with the current, and to continue to weave your way, that's the goal. And we're going to do that with our daily affirmations. Let's say them together. Today is going to be a great day. Something cool is going to happen for me today. No matter what happens today, I can handle it. An exciting new chapter in my life is starting today. I need to give myself more credit for how hard I'm trying. I'm allowed to be a work in progress. If I keep showing up, life will reward me. I have an important contribution to make to the world. Do you notice that each of these is picking up the oar on the raft of life? And none of them are we saying that we're in control, but in all of them we're saying we can steer, and this is the way we're going to steer ourselves into a positive experience. And now for the downer of the day, which is where we're going to spend most of our time. Sadness and the cross. Or as I like to say it, don't just do something, sit there. One of the things they make you do before you become a pastor is make you be a chaplain in the hospital for 12 weeks, long weeks, grueling weeks. And we often refer to it as boot camp for pastors. And so you start on your first day, and you're probably wearing a collar for the first time in your life. And you walk in there, and you're like, I'm going to brighten people's day. And then about a week in, you realize that there's a chapel in every hospital that's usually empty, right? There's not usually a whole lot going on there. But if you're a chaplain, you know that when I walk in, I expect to see one of my fellow chaplains crying in the corner alone. That's a pretty common occurrence for what happens here. It changes you on a deep, deep level. The way that you see problems and experiences in the world changes everything. The first time this is a trigger warning. This whole session is going to be about grief and loss and deep, deep sadness. On the day one of the tour, they take you to 2 morgues. One morgue is for adults, and one is not for adults. Yeah. And then this thing happens where I was at Big Wake, the one on New Bern Avenue. Yeah, I got lost so many times, physically, but also spiritually, emotionally, lots of being lost. And it's a Trauma 1 hospital, which means that if there's a bad accident somewhere, car or otherwise, when I was there was an explosion at like a Frito-Lay plant, and they brought in all of these burn victims as they're going through this thing. And so in the Trauma 1, this is dating me a little bit, we had pagers. I don't think they do pagers anymore. I had a pager that I wore on my hip. And you walk around the hospital, and I'm 24 or something like this. And I'm walking around this hospital, and I'm the chaplain. I'm the on-call chaplain. There are other chaplains during the day, but at night, the crazy things don't happen during the day. They happen at night. And at night, you're it. You're the on-call chaplain. And you turn a corner. I turned a corner one time after, a 20-hour shift on my way to 24-hour shift. I turn the corner, and the nurse stops me, and she says, okay, we're about to take Dad off life support, and the family's in the room, and they'd like you to say a prayer as we take Dad off life support. You turn the corner into the room, there are 20 people, and they're like, our dad's going to die in the next 2 minutes. Will you say a prayer for the patriarch of our family unit? Will you say something that's really, really good? And you hold hands with everybody and you say, cool, what's Dad's name? Right? Like that level of chaos. And so because it's a trauma center and people come in on ambulances, I'm in the room where they, think of the show ER or whatever hospital, they bring somebody in and they're like, 42-year-old female, motorcycle accident, boom, 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 boom. And they're spouting off all these things. They are cutting people's clothes off in front of us, and I'm doing this, right? And then blood to the ceiling, and you're like, oh my gosh, I am in the wrong place. I should not be here. And in fact, I almost fainted. The first 5 times I almost fainted. And I felt so out of place. I have no medical degree. I was a kid. I had if you want to feel inferior, be in that room where the doctors and nurses are just throwing things around. And I said to my supervisor, I don't want to do that anymore. And he goes, so here's your pager. And I said, I don't know why I'm there. Like, I just shouldn't be there. And he said, it's their job to run around and do everything. It's your job to not do something, but sit there. And it changed me, y'all, like on a molecular level. That as soon as they, boom, 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 they stopped the bleeding and they've decided what test they're going to order and what the thing is, there's a parting of medical professionals. And they say, come on, boy. They don't say that. Chaplain. And I would come up, and if they're responsive, I would say, hi, I'm Daniel, I'm the chaplain. Who would you like me to call? And then I wander up to a phone, and I call somebody in their Zumba class and say, this is Wake Med Hospital, I'm the on-call chaplain, and your son or daughter or grandmother or somebody is here. Would you like to come in? Are you safe to come in? And then they ask me all the medical questions, which I can't answer. I'm legally not allowed to answer, even if I could. I didn't hear any other word, every other word that they said in there. Like, all I know is that it's really bad. And that was horrible. That was horrible. Being with people in the worst of times was horrible. And yet, it's really, really beautiful. Once you get used to it, in some sense, it is the most beautiful space in the entire world. I have seen my babies come into this world, and I have seen people leave this world, and it's the same level of glimpsing eternity and miraculousness and awe-inspiring, and it's borderline addictive. I'm serious, in the weirdest way. Heather and Anna are like nodding over here because they've done this. Because, like, if you're a thrill junkie, like, there's nothing more than this. Like, it's borderline addictive because you're just in it. You want to be present in your life. Don't just do something. Sit there in a hospice room when they take somebody off life support, when you're talking about donating organs, and then the person comes in and they tell you who they donated your loved one's organs to. All of those things. It is holy and sacred. I've got goosebumps just talking about it. It was really hard. It's really hard. When I talk to people like Heather who continue to do this, I'm like, wow, I cannot believe that there are people who choose to do this. If you've ever spent any time visiting people in hospice, you realize that the people who work there are God's holy angels, full stop. They are incredible human beings who have given so much just to be there. One of the things you get really good at is just listening. You do not have to solve people's sadness. You cannot solve people's sadness. You cannot tell them that it's always going to be all right. You cannot tell them that they're going to pull through. You cannot tell mom and dad on the phone what's actually wrong with their so-and-so who came in from a car accident. By the way, if you're still driving a motorcycle, this is your sign to stop. I've seen way more than there should be on this. You do not have to solve it, and in fact, you can't. There is nothing you can do. Unless you are a medical professional, your job is don't just do something, sit there. And it's a lot easier than you think it is when you give up on the idea that you have another job. In those moments, you don't. I liked this line from the Emotional Intelligence book. Listening isn't just about hearing words. It's also about listening to tone, speed, volume, and voice. What is being said? Is anything not being said? What hidden messages exist below the surface? I know some of us are very intuitive, and some of us are far more sensory. And that's okay, because whatever tools you're using, there are answers in that in nonverbal communication. Things like, are they making eye contact with me? Things like, is their hand fidgeting? Are they doing this with their leg? Are they crossed like this? Are they refusing to look? Are they breathing heavy? Or are they smiling? Is the smile fake? You know what a fake smile looks like. If you don't, just go to any corporate website's page of staff. And you can find out I'm dead inside, right? Some of those pictures. When I'm standing talking to someone, I notice their feet. Are their feet angled toward me? Then they're really engaged. If they're angled away from me, they're waiting to leave, right? Small gestures, big gestures, all of the things that we say and that we don't say. There's a lot here. You don't have to be an expert to just listen, watch, notice, heart rate, breathing levels. If they're doing this, if they're covering their mouth, they don't like what's happening, right? Have you ever watched a scary movie like this? If they have their hand to their face, they're likely uncomfortable. If they're preening, right? That means they like you, okay? There's a lot of nonverbal cues out there. I like all of y'all. How's my hair? I got a haircut 2 days ago, and I said, my hairline's receding. She said, I have a haircut for that. So what do you think? What do you think of my hair's receding haircut here? In those moments of despair, which are also incredibly beautiful, this is a question that comes up. Where's God? Why did God let this happen? Or sometimes people would say, what did I do to anger God? Or sometimes they say, God's not listening, or God's dead, or sometimes they say, I can't believe God let this happen, and I also know that God's going to not let me die. Sometimes, this didn't happen to me, but one of my chaplain friends, somebody took him and pushed him up against a wall and said, I know you can perform miracles, save my daughter's life. Where was God? That's what we're going to talk about today, all the way down in the pit. Now, we're going to do that with our head center first. I think that's the easiest way in. This is called the problem of theodicy. I preached on this about 4 months ago, and I know you all wrote it down and you've got it locked and loaded, so this is just a refresher. But this is the idea of theodicy. If it's true that God is all-powerful, that God is all-loving, and there's human suffering, there seems to be a disconnect between these three things, okay? And the problem of theodicy is that any two can stand logically, but all three cannot. If God is all-powerful and there's human suffering, but God is not loving, that makes sense rationally, yeah? If God is all-powerful and God is all-loving and there's no human suffering, that makes sense. And if God is all-loving and there's human suffering, it must mean that God is not all-powerful. Do you see the problem? There are tomes, libraries written about the problem of theodicy. I teach this with our confirmation students, and I often zoom in on what it means for God to love us. Okay, that's the part of the equation that I think we get a little bit wrong here, because we think of God like a grandparent, right, who gives us everything that we ever want. But you find out sometimes that it's actually the parents who love deeper, because they don't just give you what they want, they give you what you need. And sometimes what you need is the freedom to fail. Okay? I could keep training wheels on my children's bikes all the time. But one of the hard things you have to do as a parent is to take those off and watch them fall. There's no amount of head knowledge, there's no number of books you can read or YouTube videos to watch about how to keep your balance on a bicycle that will save a child from falling off of it. You have to learn the hard way. And so, this is a little deep, but if there are no consequences, it literally means that there's no free will. So in order for God to love us the way that a parent loves us, God must create enough space for us to choose right and wrong, good and evil, choices. We have to choose love, or else it's not love. It takes free will to do those things. Enter the book of Job. Job's a fun read. Joyful, happy, good times. Actually, don't really recommend that you read the book of Job. I think I've read it exactly one time, and I think it was one too many. The first 3 chapters are good. Starting in 58's pretty good. And there's a lot in the middle. Yeah. And here's why. It's because this horrible thing befalls Job, and there's some suggestion that God is at the heart of it with the Hasatan, the Satan, which I don't have time to explain. And then he has these 3 moron friends who don't practice empathy. They do this other thing by saying, Job, you must have done something really bad in order to have this befall you. What did you do to upset God? And they do that ad nauseum for chapters and chapters and chapters. Here's my favorite verse in the middle of Job. Then Job answered, I've heard many things. Miserable comforters are you all. Yeah, he could be speaking to some of us sometimes. We are miserable comforters when we try to get to the why or the how, when we try to give advice that was never asked for, when we try to fix things that can't fix. When I say, I feel like X, and you say, no, you shouldn't feel that way. You think you're helping, but you're not. You need to say, I'm so sorry that it feels like that. Not, it's not that. Yeah? And to say that better than I ever could is Brene Brown.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Somebody say amen. Sympathy creates disconnection. Empathy creates connection. You heard her say that there. Yeah. Do you notice there is actually nothing you can say to make it better? It can't be fixed. Mortality cannot be fixed. Loss cannot be fixed. Most relationships cannot be fixed. Our feelings are not meant to be fixed. It's actually even better to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm glad that you told me. Or my classic line that you've probably heard me say is, I'm here and I care. Here's a goal. If this is hard for you, here's a goal. Look into their eyes until you've determined all the colors in their eyes. If that's all you can do, that's a home run compared to all that other nonsense. Yeah? Just look into their eyes long enough to know the color of their eyes. If you've done that and not said something harmful, you have fostered connection. And it's connection that we crave in our darkest moments. I like this line from Job. Where shall wisdom be found? Mortals do not know the way of it. Remember that wisdom is very different from knowledge. And those guys, those moron friends who were really bad at empathy, kept saying, well, at least this and this and this and this. And he's like, where do I go to get wisdom? And there's some great lines that I cut for time. But God comes at the end of this with Job and says, I can't quite explain to you your suffering, but just know that there is something much bigger than you out there. So your sadness is part of a whole existence of humanity that you're part of, right? Job's an interesting one. But it reminds us of that deep suffering, which leads us to the story, the passion, Jesus on the cross. Here is maybe the darkest moment of all of humanity. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? You see how the writer's inviting you in to empathy here. He doesn't just tell you what Jesus says. Almost everything that the gospel writer writes, he writes in Greek, even though Jesus spoke Aramaic. But here, to invite you all the way in, he quotes Jesus in Aramaic and then takes the extra time to tell you what it says in Greek, which in your version shows up in English. My God, why have you forsaken me? Now, that moment of vulnerability for Jesus sounds a little bit out of left field, unless you know the Psalms. Because, my God, why have you forsaken me is the very beginning of Psalm 22. And Psalms answer each other. And the psalm after Psalm 22 is, although I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So, his prayer, although it's vulnerable, although it's true, although he's going through a lot, is also deeply rooted in a faith that is not afraid to be sad. The Psalms show us how to healthily handle our emotions, which is why many of them are laments, like Psalm 22. Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down, he said. Is that empathy or sympathy? Borderline not even sympathy. Yeah. here's some wine. That's going to make this better. And also, let's see if something cool happens. Yeah. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. This is Jesus' death moment. The curtain of the temple is torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." It is not a disciple. It is not a follower. It is not a Jewish person. It is a soldier who has empathy for Jesus in the moment in which he dies. Maybe the only one to actually see Jesus for who he is, for what is happening, to get all the way down in the pit with Jesus is the centurion. This moment of empathy shows us how we experience deep loss and sadness. So my question for you is, how close do you imagine you could get to the cross? This is a real historical event. Jesus really lived, was put on a phony trial, refused to exonerate himself because it wasn't going to work anyway, peacefully and willingly carried his own cross, was whipped and beaten and mocked. They made a crown of thorns. They hurt him repeatedly. He lost so much blood, and at the end of that, they put him up in between two prisoners. They nailed his hands and his feet. It was believed that to die on the cross was not only death to the person, but to the movement. The goal wasn't just to kill a person, it was to cruelly, painfully kill them. It is the most devastatingly painful way to die that's ever been created. And it was created by humans. And it was said that when you die, you typically go mad before you die. And that's how they killed the movement. They wanted a great leader to be up on the cross begging for their life, begging to be taken down, bargaining against everything. They wanted the people who followed Jesus to lose heart in the movement of who Jesus is and was because he lost it, because he couldn't stand the pain. And yet, in that deepest, darkest moment, Jesus says, Psalm 22. How close could you get? Would you stay home? Would you get on the edge of the hill? Would you get within 100 yards? Would you get close enough to hear him? Could you get up there? Could you touch his hands? Could you look him in the eyes? How close could you get to this pain? I think there's a direct correlation. And if you're not there, that is fine. That is fine. It's fine to know your level. I learned in those dark moments that my empathy takes over, and I feel other people's pain. And that became very exhausting for me. So I had to limit my exposure because there wasn't a time that me taking their pain meant less pain for them. So if you can't get all the way, that's fine. But you cannot live your life pretending like there's no pain. You can't look away from it. One of the things that I think is a mistake in our society is that we don't talk about death and dying enough. If you haven't yet read Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, which is Pastor Peter's book study right now, you ought to, because we will all die. We will all die. Yeah. If you can't look at that, I would invite you to take a couple more steps closer to the cross to see what pain and suffering looks like so that you are ready when it comes for you. It's another great psalm, a great lament. As the deer pants for water, my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Where can I go and meet with God? My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, "Where is your God?" When you are in the pit, be in the pit. Sit with your emotions. Sadness is crazy beautiful. Crazy, crazy beautiful. There are a lot of benefits, health benefits, spiritual benefits, mental benefits from sitting with your sadness. Whoever told you that you shouldn't cry, that's a bunch of nonsense. Whoever told you that you shouldn't be sad, that you should suck it up, bunch of nonsense. I was raised on this bizarre Disney movie where they killed off the mama deer in like the first 2 minutes, and then this oddly happy rabbit walked around telling everybody, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't what? Horrible advice, Disney. You just told a baby to never talk about the pain of losing his mother to him. Horrible advice. I lived with that meta-narrative for at least 20 years. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Because somehow if you do say something that's not nice, you're like letting other people know about your pain and like, don't be a buzzkill. If you don't like something that someone's doing, just work around it. Be cool. Go with the flow. Walk on eggshells. At least 20 years of my life, not speaking my truths. A shame. It's a shame. Your sadness has lots to teach you. I've got a picture of John Mayer here, because John Mayer is where I go when I'm sad, because he's always sad. And if John Mayer ever got happy, he would have no more songs to write. I need him. Like a vampire, I feed on his sadness. And if he ever gets a healthy relationship, I'm screwed. Just done. There are health benefits of sadness. Take a picture of this slide. Remember it. Talk about it later. It promotes change in your life. You ever heard somebody talk about rock bottom? Nowhere to go but up. It fosters connection. You realize who's important to you and who they think you're important in your deepest, darkest moments. Who's there for you? Who knows how, when you say, I don't want anything, I don't need any food, who knows how to slightly, and I mean slightly invade? When we put up our barriers, slightly invade. Not invite themselves to your house to spend the night. And by the way, where are those extra sheets? Right? But slightly get past our defenses. Because our defense is to say, I don't need anything, I'm fine, I'm alone. How about, I sent you a text, I made you a meal, I left it in a cooler on your front porch. How about that? That's a level that I could tolerate. Yeah. Fosters connection. It deepens our appreciation for people, for memories. The loss of a loved one deepens when you no longer have access to them. It helps you to process loss. We lose things, and people say things all the time like they shouldn't feel lost. I'm not just talking about for people. I'm talking about like, I miss my old apartment. I know that sounds silly because it was small and it sucked and the walls were really thin, but I like miss it in a weird way. I had my van stolen a few years ago, and I have a new van, and it's awesome. Big Red is awesome. But I miss Big Daddy. Because he was great too. And Big Mama, who was before Big Daddy. This is my third Toyota Sienna. I'm a lifer. You have to process loss, okay? So I could say, I miss my old van, and you could come up to me and say, but Daniel, why are you complaining? You have a great new minivan, and it's bright red like the Arizona Cardinals and the NC State Wolfpack. Why aren't you just happy with it? And I could say, yeah, but I can be both. I still have loss. The number of times that people come up to me and they say, Pastor, I know this is weird, but I miss my ex. I miss my Nintendo. Even though there are better game systems out here, I don't want any of them. Because I don't know how to play them. It's okay. Process loss. Use that sadness. Increases self-awareness. Yeah. Empathy. When you are in the pit, it makes you think of the other people that you know in your life who've been in the pit, and you're like, oh, wow, I was kind of a jerk to them. Oh, wow, I now have a better awareness of how I cry or what it looks like when I'm really sad or something like that. Here's something you need to know. There is no one way to grieve. There is no right way to grieve. We talk about the stages of grief like there's some linear thing, like there's a doctor with a checklist saying, okay, good. Oh, we're all the way to bargaining? Okay, check. We did anger? Check. It's not like that. Here are some of the ways that you could process your loss. Do you know what some people do while their loved one is dying? And I come in to the hospital room, they say, Pastor, I really want to plan his service. And I'm sorry if that sounds crass, but that's where my mind is, and I want to do that right here, right now. Okay. We can do that. There's no one way or right way. Some people wail and pull their hair out. Some people are far more stoic. Some of us are like late processors. Like, I don't process well in real time. But 3 months from now, I'll be devastated. Yeah, I'm a little slow on the uptake. There's no one way. There's no right way. But please spend some time and find what works for you. Increase your self-awareness, and it sparks creativity, which is why my man John Mayer is here. If he was happy, he would never write the brilliant lyric, my dear, it feels like we're slow dancing in a burning room. That's a great line that a happy singer could never write, right? In the same way that the Beatles, if they weren't stoned and on LSD, would never be able to write, I want to be under the sea and an octopus's garden. That's not something a sober person writes. There are so many benefits from feeling our feelings, and there are so many warnings when we don't. So back to the problem of pain, back to the problem of theodicy. There are natural disasters that happen in our world. There's no question that there are things outside of our control that hurt a lot. And we start asking the why me? How can God let bad things happen to good people? There are lots of ways where we can be victims, and there are ways in which we are victims. But that should not define us. We don't let the outside define the inside. We make the inside push back on the outside. And we show the world how we respond. And here's the horrible truth. There are natural disasters. There's cancer. There are things that suck in this world. There's dementia. There are hurricanes. There are all kinds of horrible things. But here is the worst truth of all, is that humans create unnatural disasters at a much larger clip than the universe creates natural ones. It's one thing for there to be a coronavirus, a COVID in our world. We still don't know if it was man-made, by the way. Scientists are about half and half about whether they think it was cooked up in a lab. That's not a joke. But it gets made so much worse by the way we don't work together, by the way we treat each other, by the President of the United States saying that we should inject ourselves with bleach or whatever it is that he said along those lines. When Hurricane Katrina happened, it was a horrible natural disaster made worse by a poor response and mobilization effort. When 9/11 happened, you have this horrible, unnatural disaster made worse by pundits coming on TV and saying God is punishing gay people. Do you remember that? It is humans who invented the cross. And the cross is the worst possible unnatural disaster. So when I ask the question of how close could you get to the cross, I'm also saying, how much can you stand how horrible humans can be to each other? And the more you see, it hurts. But it also makes you stronger. There's a reason why we send pastors to boot camp. And it's so that when bad things happen in their church, it's not their first time. I was overwhelmed by the whole thing. Ashley came in the middle of the night one time, because I'm not allowed to leave the hospital. And I've gotten so tired of hospital food and just all of it. And I was like, this pager hadn't gone off for 45 minutes. Ashley came in and she held the pager for me so that I could sleep for, I don't know, like an hour or something. But I couldn't hold the pager and sleep. It was too much for me, overwhelming. She came and did that for me, right? So like, in those horrible moments of being a chaplain, I found out so much about myself. I saw so much of humanity. And I remember the next day, after just a crazy, horrible shift, I think it was the 4th of July and fireworks and all of that. And the next day I slept and I got up and I went to the grocery store and I was like, I am blissfully nobody right now. I mean, blissfully nobody. And that sense of humbleness that no one's really asking for Daniel Pugh in the hospital. They're asking for the chaplain. And it's me now, and it's, my friend Robert tomorrow, and it's Heather on the 3rd day. And like, it's overwhelmingly powerful to know that when we get in close proximity to sadness, we foster connection that is deep and lasting. I had a woman make me a pie, tracked me down 3 weeks later to give it to me. And I'm like, I'm holding a pie in a hospital, and I really don't want this pie in this hospital. It is so humbling as a pastor to be invited into people's most sacred moments. Like, if you imagine concentric circles of like the closeness of the people closest to you, as a pastor, I walk through every single one of those. And sometimes I even have to say, okay, great, what's Dad's name? This quote from Charlie Chaplin, I didn't even know he could speak, honestly. You need power only when you want to do something harmful. Otherwise, love is enough to get everything done. Somebody say amen. You need power only when you want to do something harmful. Otherwise, love is enough to get everything done. For a non-theologian, that's a pretty darn good theology of the cross. Beautiful. Here's a good quote, too. Optimism is when the current circumstances suggest that things will improve. This is not the same thing as hope. Hope is an existential leap into the unknown. It's an imagining of a future that does not yet exist and is committing ourselves to going after it no matter what. This is what it means to be a Christian. We don't live in a world where we're overly rosy and optimistic. We just say, come hell or high water, this is the way Christians act in the world. We get close when things are messy. We love people because that is the way of Jesus, and we will continue to build God's kingdom in this place no matter who's in charge, no matter how much chaos is going on, and no matter how many unnatural disasters humans create in order to torture each other. We believe in a better way. And we're going to do that. Here's the thing I want to end and leave you with today. It's called choose your hard. You ever heard that expression before? Here's the truth. Life sucks sometimes. There is no magic pill to make life not hurt. Life hurts. All of us, everyone ages, everyone has pain, everyone has broken relationships, everyone has sinned, everyone has trouble in their lives, everyone has regrets, everyone ruminates, everyone can stay up all night, every single one of us can hurt someone in a way that only God could forgive. What choose your heart means is, if life's going to be hard, you might as well choose the thing that you're going to devote yourself to that's hard. You might as well make something easier by taking the Dunning-Kruger effect all the way down to the bottom and working your way up. You might as well learn to play piano, or learn to run, or study emotional intelligence, or learn Spanish, or be an active listener, even when that's hard for you. Learn people's names when they give them to you. You can do it. You are not bad at names, you're bad at listening. You're bad at listening in that moment. When you go to shake someone's hand, you're worried about how you look, and that's what you're spending your brain power on. It's not that you can't learn their names. It's that you're thinking about how you look, how you come across, and not them. And guess what? They're thinking about them too. They didn't remember what tie you wore. They didn't remember your name. If you become the best listener in the room, you have unlocked a superpower. And by the way, you can choose to study Scripture. Send me an email. I'll give you a list. We'll work through it together. You have to choose your heart. Because life will be hard whether or not you choose it. You might as well choose something to get good at it. Because, and as this says here, choosing your heart means acknowledging the difficult path exists in life and intentionally selecting with challenges to face, recognizing that both pursuing a difficult goal and avoiding it both have hard consequences. I can choose to run a moderate amount and have the good consequences of my legs hurt, but my heart is healthy. Or I can choose not to run and be in and out of the hospital for my last decade of life before it finally takes me, or worse. Life will be hard. You might as well choose it. I love it. And here's the thing that I just need you to know. We're going to end this here. Here's the beautiful sacredness of Jesus on the cross. It's not just that it's the exact place where the most unnatural human suffering has ever been dealt out. When you get close enough to Jesus there, when you crawl into the pit with Jesus, you realize that's the exact moment that he crawled in the pit with you to say, hey, I know it's dark down here, and you're not alone. Amen. Thanks for coming. Come back next week. It'll be more fun, I promise.